वासुदेव. हरि ओम. शं नो मित्रः शं वरुणः शं नो भवत्वर्यमा शं न इन्द्रो बृहस्पतिः शं नो विष्णुरुक्रमः. नमो ब्रह्मणे नमस्ते वायो त्वमेव प्रत्यक्षं ब्रह्मासि त्वामेव प्रत्यक्षं ब्रह्म वदिष्यामि ऋतं वदिष्यामि सत्यं वदिष्यामि तन्मामवतु तद्वक्तारमवतु अवतु माम् अवतु वक्तारम्. ओम शांति शांति शांतिः. प्राच्यपाश्चात्यदेशानां समन्वयविधायकं शान्तं सौम्यगुणोपेतं कृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुं. सर्ववेदार्थतत्त्वज्ञं वेदार्थप्रतिपादकं पुराणसारसर्वज्ञं कृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुम्. ओम अस्मद्गुरुभ्यो नमः. Welcome to all our brothers and sisters. So, while concluding our study of the 16th aphorism last week, we were discussing about the three layers of awakenings in the consciousness. One is individuality, which is the first shell, and the second is personality, which is the second shell. And after the two shells are broken out, then we enter the soul consciousness. So that is what we are studying. So the awakening of the individuals, it may take place in any of the layers of his quality before he is awakened into the yoga consciousness. An individual, a person who is not yet awakened in the yoga consciousness, all the time, so his awakening may take place in any of the layers of his qualities. So in that state he lives in his mind, which belongs to qualities. Qualities are not the true existence. We have studied this. The truth is only I am. What I am is the truth. And the qualities belong to what I have. So that is not the real existence. The real existence is as I am. So before the person is awakened into yoga consciousness, he lives in these layers, in his mind and in his senses. So he perceives all the things around with the mind. When he perceives with the mind, he grasps or he receives only the qualities of the environment and never the truth, the true existence. The true existence is always the Lord consciousness, the indweller, the I am, in all. I am in each and every one, which is the same. That is the true existence. But the mind is attached to the qualities. So, qualities in every person, qualities in every object, the mind gets attached to the qualities only. So the qualities of his environment, that is the state of his living, and he is not awakened into yoga consciousness. So this attachment of the mind gives rise to desire. And this makes the mind dependent upon the desired qualities. But these qualities are ever changing. That also we have studied with examples, with our own examples. Like the features of our body and all these, they are always changing. So mind lives in a sense of insecurity. When as long as the mind is dependent upon the desired qualities, it is in a sense of insecurity. So when the consciousness of a person is in the individual level or individuality, then he proves himself to be a more dangerous animal, the human being, because he is having all high intelligence than the animals, in addition to the common factors with the animals, which are the fear and then the desire and then also the anger, all these things. Therefore, human being will be more dangerous because of this combination of these factors. Because there are, in the common factors, like fear, animals have fear but only for self-protection. But the human being has fear more magnified than self-protection. So, in order to protect his desires and all his things, he may go to any extent to harm the other person due to fear. So fear, hatred, desire, all these things which are very magnified. So these are all very strong as long as he is in individuality. Dangerous type of behavior will be there as long as he is in this, his consciousness is in the individual level, in individuality. Because all his reactions are basing on instincts and reflexes. So, then when this individuality, the shell of individuality is broken, then he grows a bit more. He grows into personality consciousness. When he was in the individuality consciousness, then he is concerned only about his hunger and only. So when he is concerned only when he is hungry. He is not concerned with the hunger of the other beings when he is individual. But when he when his first shell of individuality is broken, when he is awakened into personality consciousness, then he will be able to realize that the other persons also have hunger and they also need food like him. So he will realize, he'll be able to realize his needs in others also. So therefore there is a development of social living. So there will be an outcome or a development of the virtues like the charity and also non-violence, all these virtues, gradually he develops these virtues and start to practice these virtues. But in this level of consciousness, of personality, he develops virtues, but that will be like a business. So he behaves in a virtuous manner for a reciprocation from others. So he expects, when he honors, so it is like a business. So this is what is called marketing the virtues. He has virtues in this level, in the personality level. He develops virtues. He is virtuous. But he lives on the virtues, but like a business transaction. Suppose, for example, he may share his food with the other person when the other person is hungry, because he knows it is just like his hunger. But at the same time, he can offer, he can share, but in the mind, he expects that the other person should reciprocate. So he feels that now I help him, or now I share for him. Because afterwards, when there is an instance, a necessity, then the other person also will reciprocate, he will share for me. So it is like a business transaction. It's not free of any expectation and all these things. So he continues in this level of consciousness, personality consciousness, for some births, and then the shell also is broken. Then he enters into soul consciousness. This is what is called Purushakhyati in the 16th aphorism. What is told as Purushakhyati in the aphorism by Patanjali. Purusha, the one person supreme. So an experience of this Purusha, that is Purushakhyati. So we remember only that when we enter into soul level, then no more we are attached to the qualities in the other person. Because we are raised to the soul level. So then he starts experiencing the soul light, the I am consciousness. When once he starts experiencing this, then he is no more attached to the qualities. Because this is a real, true experience. This is a true experience when he enters into the soul level, when after the second shell also is broken. So then, in such a state, so when he speaks to other person, when he transacts with other person, he will transact not with the qualities. Because there is no more thirst for the qualities. He has already crossed that. Because he is experiencing the one Lord consciousness indweller, which is the same in himself and in the others. So that is, so when in that state, when two persons are existing, speaking to each other, then two bodies are existing but only one soul. That is the difference. That is the experience in the soul level. Only bodies exist, only one soul. Suppose we are now many at a distance. Physically we are very far away. We are many now. So if we are in the soul level, what will be our experience? We experience that there are so many bodies, but only one existence, I am. This will be new in the beginning for us, but this is the real experience of real existence. That is what is called group consciousness, soul consciousness. So there are many people, we are many, but we do not exist as many persons, as only one person. That is the soul consciousness, which is also called group consciousness. It was first introduced by Master Jwalkul through his teachings in the 20th century. He called it group consciousness. So this is then the work done through all the people is called a group work. The example is our present work. All of us, you are there, I am here. Only our bodies are scattered at different places. As I told you last time, I am in India and you are all in Germany, in Belgium, France, in Switzerland, in Italy, or in America, or in Russia, or in Ukraine, anywhere, in Australia, anywhere. You may be. Around the globe. We are. So around the globe our bodies are there, but we are existing as one consciousness, that is the soul consciousness. So that is, then what is going on? It is group work. So group work is possible when our consciousness is raised to the soul level after breakout of individuality and personality. Before the shell is broken, it is not possible. But after the two shells are broken, then it is possible. So I hope in all of us, you and me, we can hope that the two shells are broken now. Therefore, we are in our group work. So we accepted that the breakout of the shells, because some people are afraid to come out of individuality and personality, because they are afraid of some new experience. Some people feel that if I lose my individuality, how I can live in this world? But you can live happily only when you come out of individuality. That is the truth. Really you can live happily only after coming out from the shells of individuality and personality. That is, then only we can be really happy. But we cannot, because we have not experienced it so far before that, we cannot realize this. Therefore we are afraid, a little bit afraid, to lose our individuality and personality. So after coming out and after entering soul consciousness or group consciousness, then we will realize that this is the true existence and the happy experience, and no more we want to slip back into that consciousness, into that experience. So this is group work. So for group, so before we entered into group consciousness, we were in personality consciousness. There it is only mass consciousness, not group consciousness. There is a difference between mass consciousness and group consciousness. In group consciousness, everyone in the group will feel that we are just like different parts of the same body of the person. Just like that, we are a synthetic existence of all these different souls or different persons. But it is a synthetic existence, as one spirit, as one I am. That is what is called a group. So that is the difference between a mass and a group. In mass also there are many people. When we are traveling in a train, you cannot call a group, even though you are traveling with about 100 passengers or more, you cannot call it a group. It is mass. That is what we see when we are living in these big cities or living in. It is not group. We cannot call it a group. We may know many people each other. I know many people there when I come there. You know many people when you are there or when you have come to India, wherever. We can know many people, but we cannot call all this a group unless all the persons in the group, their consciousness is elevated into soul consciousness or group consciousness. Before that, even though there are many individuals, many persons, it is only mass consciousness, not group consciousness. That is the difference. It is just like, for example, if we bring a few pieces of iron and put them together, they cannot be one. There are many pieces of iron. They are kept only gathered together, but they exist only as different pieces. The same pieces of iron, when they got magnetized, when they are transformed into magnets, once again, if they are brought together, because all of them are magnets, so they are brought together and they exist as not different pieces, because the magnetism which is working through all of them, all of these pieces, is only one. So therefore, all these are no more pieces of iron, and all these are no more many magnets. It is only magnet. So that is only called magnetism. So therefore, this is an example for group consciousness or soul consciousness. So like this you can experience the soul consciousness. And this can be attained by abhyasa, by repetition of the application. What for all this is to be in yogic state, to get stabilized in the yogic state, yoga consciousness, which can occur when the behavior of the mind is suspended. Chitta vritti nirodha. That we should not forget. In the beginning, in the very beginning aphorism, the second aphorism, yoga chitta vritti nirodha. Yoga means the state where there is suspension of the behavior of mind. So, for that, all this is being explained, which we have to. The first one is abhyasa, repeating the application, that is abhyasa. And now we are studying about vairagya. So for that we are studying all this. So now we know what vairagya is. That means when we are transacting with a person, then we are not transacting with any part of the person, with the appearance of the person, but we are transacting with the inner light, which is the same, the inner light in yourself. When I am speaking to you, who is speaking? It is the inner person, the I am. And who is listening? It is the same inner person, I am. So this is the experience. So this can be possible when we are not having any thirst for the qualities of the other person. So it does not depend upon the so-called relationships. So this is higher to that. There is only one relationship, that is I am, that's all. No other relationships. All the other relationships, what we have, what we experience in our outer world, they are superimpositions. We superimpose, which we call different relationships, which is not the true existence. Superimposition cannot be the true existence. You see, if somebody is an officer in an office, he is a boss. So boss is a superimposition, it is not the truth. The truth is only I am, the indweller. That is the truth. Boss is only a superimposition. Like similarly, wife or husband or friend or enemy, all these things are superimpositions, which is not the true existence. So, even the biological, suppose I say he is my son, so it is biological relationship. And the real relationship is soul only. So this, when our consciousness rises to the soul level, then it is not dependent upon any of these relationships. So this is the real Vairagya. So non-attachment or Vairagya. So then this Vairagya, you see, we have been studying this one aphorism, this one aspect of Vairagya since last 3 sessions. But yet, just we have completed the explanation for 16th aphorism, but that doesn't mean we have completely known what is Vairagya. It needs again and again to contemplate again and again. So it is just like when we go in a building, we start ascending the stairs. It is a multi-storied building. So we entered the building on the ground floor, base, and then we started ascending one floor by another floor. Then consequently, we have been switching on the lights in every floor for illumination. So just imagine, first when we entered the ground floor at the base, when we switched on, that light can illuminate only that floor. And then when we ascend into next floor and put on the light, this light can illumine this floor and also the floor which we left down. Like this we go on ascending, and the same phenomenon, when we reach the top floor, highest floor, and the light which has been switched on can illumine all the floors. That is the arrangement in this. So this is also like this. When we reach the soul consciousness, then it illumines all our layers of consciousness. So then, this is whatever may be the propositions or whatever may be, but all the new propositions and all the new explanations, everything should reach this soul level. So this is called the wisdom. So wisdom in the light of wisdom, knowledge in the light of knowledge. So there will be a rearrangement in us. The more we get more and more deeper in the experience, there will be a wonderful rearrangement. So that is what being given in coming aphorism. So we are entering into the 17th aphorism now. That doesn't mean that all the 16 aphorisms we are completely, once for all, we have finished. This is not like it is not completing the syllabus for the examination. When we are students, we are given some syllabus. We study to complete the syllabus. Here this syllabus is for the whole life, not only in one birth, it is syllabus for many births to come. So we should not feel that we have to finish the syllabus. It is not finishing, it is more and more unfoldment. Unfoldment like a flower. When a bud starts unfolding and unfolding, is unfoldment. That is what we experience in studying these aphorisms. So now we enter into the 17th aphorism. It is here now he is going to explain about the vairagya, the non-attachment, which is it is vairagya, but just little bit in a different, once again, in a different experience. Here, the 17th aphorism is vitarka vichara ananda asmita anugamat samprajnataha. So vitarka means the logic of several things. That is called vitarka, logic. We have logic, the logic for everything. So vitarka. And then vichara. Vichara means approaching the various objectives. And ananda. Ananda means experiencing. That is ananda. Asmita. Asmita means the feeling of I am. Feeling of I am. Anugama means following, which follows. Anugama. Samprajnata. So this type of vairagya, what is going to be explained is called samprajnata vairagya. Samprajnata means all conscious state. So the meaning of the aphorism as such is the all conscious state becomes possible by following the logic of everything the approach to everything, the joy of everything, and existing as the knowledge I am in everything. Knowledge of I am in everything. So this is the aphorism. So when everything in this world is observed through senses and mind, because observation starts with senses and mind always, because they are given to us for that purpose. Our physical body, our senses, our mind, our power of discrimination, which is called buddhi, and our ego, I amness, that is what is, all these are given to us by nature, forces of nature, divine forces. So all these are our implements. But one thing we have to remember, we should not forget that we are not our instruments. Instruments are given to us to use, make use of them. We are not the instruments. Suppose I am given a mobile. That is an instrument which I can make use of. I am not the mobile. I should not get identified with the mobile. If I get identified with the mobile, I am the mobile, then if the mobile is broken, then I feel I am dead. So every time when the mobile is spoiled, then I feel, oh, something happened to me like that. So I am not my instrument. Instruments are given as implements to make use. So in the same manner, our senses and mind are fine instruments given to us to make use. What for? For observation. How can you observe any person or any object in the world? How can you observe without making use of your senses and mind? It's not possible. So these are very fine, sophisticated instruments given to us by the forces of nature, which are very more sophisticated, more valuable than all the so-called sophisticated and valuable instruments fabricated by the human being. This we should not forget. We have to accept this fact. These instruments which are fabricated by the human intelligence so far are never at par, are never in match with those that are fabricated by the forces of nature. Never, never. You can swear on this. You can verify this 100 times, 1,000 times. Again, this stands always correct. We should not feel ashamed of this. No, nothing. The scientist may feel that, oh, I have worked for many decades and I have fabricated very, very sophisticated instrument. Okay, that is very good. That is how all these instruments came into existence. Our laptop is there, our tablet is there, our mobile is there and all. Okay, very good. So we can make many functions with them. It is all very good. These are all instruments framed. But yet, these are all not on par with the instruments fabricated by higher intelligence, by the forces of nature. It is a bit difficult to accept, isn't it? We can accept because we are already on the path of learning. But if there is a scientist who suddenly came today to listen to this, he will be shocked by listening to this. He says, I am the scientist. And I have fabricated a new thing which was never before. But if we say, no, it is not on par with the instruments formed by nature, he will be a bit angry. He cannot accept this. But we have to accept this. It's a fact. What is the difference between the instruments fabricated by the nature's forces and instruments fabricated by human intelligence? How can you differentiate? The instruments fabricated by forces of nature are creative, and the instruments fabricated by human intelligence are reproductive. So, always this difference is there. What is the proof? How can you prove this? By which test in the laboratory you can prove this? Oh, there is a laboratory in nature. No need for a laboratory arranged by human being. The nature itself is a big, wonderful laboratory, more sophisticated. How can you prove? You prove yourself. Very simple test is there. You can tell this to the scientist if he wants. Very simple test to differentiate between the man-made instrument and instrument made by God or forces of nature. Because some people are allergic to God, the word God. So, don't say God, maybe nature's force of nature. You take a handful of grains of wheat or whichever available, and put them into soil, sow these seeds in the soil, put some water, and within a few days you start them germinating. And gradually they grow exactly in replica, in the same manner like the source. They grow and grow, and from this innumerable seeds will come out. So these seeds are not man-made, even though they are manipulated by the human beings. Genetical manipulation, that is what being done by human fellows, the so-called scientists, in the seeds and all these things. But even then they are not man-made. Only they can manipulate, that's all. Forget about it. Now you take any instrument fabricated by the human intelligence, very sophisticated instrument, you take it, put the instrument into soil and put some water. Can you expect any tree which comes up to produce to the fruits of these instruments? Say for example the mobile. You put the mobile in the soil and put some water. Can you get a mobile tree which can give fruits, many mobiles? Can never be. So it's a very simple test for the scientist. So therefore, this is, maybe it is a bit tough to accept, but it is a fact we have to accept. All these are man-made, but man is God-made. Man cannot make man. You can make a robot in imitation of man, but a robot cannot be man. It is only imitation. The robot cannot produce children robots. Maybe it may fabricate another robot, but so therefore we have to accept this. So like this, everything in this world is observed through senses and mind. So it gives us an approach to everything. By the observation made through our senses and mind, it makes an approach to everything. So when the right measure is applied, everything presents itself in the light of right logic. So we have studied about measures, right measure, wrong measure. Like this we have studied about 5 types of behaviors. So always we have to apply the right measure. Then everything is to the happiness and enjoyment. When we apply in a right manner, so then we can experience happiness. So the inner man, when we speak of man, we have always to remember inner man and outer man. Outer man is all the other layers other than what we call I am. You remember, we have made a differentiation, what I am and what I have. What I am is the inner man and what I have is the outer man. This we can remember easily. So, the inner man makes the right use of all the measures and implements and lives in the happiness of existence. So the happiness is the experience of the inner man. Happiness is the experience of I am. Happiness cannot be experienced on the lower level. That means on the level of outer man. That cannot be experienced. It is only an impression of happiness that is experienced, which always changes. We can have a number of examples for this from our daily life. Happiness that is experienced by inner man only is stable happiness, because it is true happiness. And happiness experienced on the lower levels is not real happiness, it is only impression of happiness. The impressions are always changing, so happiness, therefore there is happiness, alternation of happiness and unhappiness, both. 2 poles. Sometimes happy, sometimes unhappy. As long as you are in this experience that sometimes you are happy, sometimes you are not happy, that means not yet you have reached the soul consciousness. That is a proof for that. When you have reached the soul consciousness, there is only happy experience. You cannot easily imagine this. How can there be always happy experience? This is immediately this question arises in our mind. If I have some pain somewhere, can you have happy experience with pain? How can it be possible? The pain is an experience felt by the mind. So that is not by the soul. So this pain which is experienced by the mind is not the experience of the soul. Therefore, happiness, real happiness, belongs to the soul, experience of the soul, which is never changing. It cannot have any inversion. The experience of the soul, you cannot have any inversion for this experience. How? For example, you take the cube. You know the cube. You have the different shapes, implements. A square and a cube, all these things. So, then a cube which has the 3 dimensions. So the cube is a perfect shape. So you turn it in any manner, it has no inversion. You can easily know this. It has 6 faces. All are equal. So you turn this in any direction, it suffers no inversion. So in the same manner, the person who has reached soul consciousness, he experiences real happiness all the time. There is no change in that, no inversion. So everything is with the happiness and enjoyment. The inner man makes the right use of all the measures and implements and lives in the happiness of existence. To enjoy this happiness, one should be aware of his own presence in everything. That is the secret. This is the real secret. To enjoy the happiness, how can you enjoy this happiness in a true sense is only we should be aware of our presence in everything. You can be aware of our presence in everything. That means, when can it be possible? When you exist as I am only, then it is possible. Because in everything, in every person and everything, the only common thing that exists is only I am. This we have to again and again we have to apply. I am is existing. It is only true existence of every person or everything, every atom is as I am only. That is the true existence. That is the real existence. So therefore, to enjoy this happiness, we should be aware of his own presence in everything. His own presence means the I am. In everything, in every person. Such a state of experience is called the all-conscious existence of a yogi. It is called technically all-conscious existence. That is what is explained in this aphorism. All-conscious existence it is called samprajñāta. This vairagya is called samprajñāta. Samprajñāta means all-conscious state. So, you can attain what is called the state of samadhi only by getting stabilized in the indweller. So this, in the beginning, this experience, since it is new, this beginning is associated with logic. That is what is given in this aphorism. This experience, in the beginning, it is associated with logic, or it is associated with the impressions, or it is associated with the feeling of the happy experience. Or also it is being felt that I am becoming that. So these are the things with which it is associated. This is called samprajñāta, all conscious state. So we will try to expand this, what is exactly meant by this. So first of all, when we are trying to apply vairagya, non-attachment, in the beginning it is a little bit strange for us, because if it is vairagya really, if it is real non-attachment or vairagya, it is not in our cognizance. So there are two types of vairagya. One is the vairagya which we can recognize in ourselves, and other is the vairagya which is incognizable. These are two types. So the vairagya which is explained in the previous aphorism, which is called paravairagya, is the vairagya, is the third type of non-attachment, which cannot be, which is beyond our cognizance. That is naturally we get into that vairagya, but we don't feel, I got vairagya now, like that. So these are the two types of vairagya. One vairagya is that you got vairagya, non-attachment, but without any cognizance, which is called the highest form of vairagya, which was discussed before in the previous aphorism. Now, the second type of vairagya that is being established, explained in this aphorism. What is the second type of vairagya is? The vairagya or the non-attachment which is being recognized by our applying of logic, and also the approach to everything, the joy about that everything, and also that I am enjoying. You say, if you are really experiencing, if you say, I am experiencing wonderful, I have got wonderful experience, So this is the second type of vairagya. This is called samprajñāta. Samprajñāta means non-vairagya, which can be measured, which of course the real vairagya cannot be measured, it is beyond measures. But that is asamprajñāta vairagya. The previous one is that is paravairagya or asamprajñāta, which cannot be measured. Now in this affair, what is being explained is samprajñāta vairagya means the vairagya which is measured. How can be measured? Some person will be there. Yes, I am practicing vairagya. Then, how much vairagya you got? Then he says, yes, I have so much vairagya in me. If you know that you have so much vairagya, that means it is not vairagya. So this is samprajñāta is not real vairagya. It is just like how when a person says, I am now sleeping, that means he is not sleeping at all. Because a person, when he is sleeping, he cannot know that he is sleeping. We slip into sleep without knowing ourselves, isn't it? Suppose I am listening to a music. Without knowledge, I may slip into sleep, a nap. And afterward, after a few minutes, then I may wake up, I am listening to music. So, this is like samprajñāta is like this. If you can say that you are sleeping, that you are not sleeping. If you are really sleeping, you cannot say anything. You can verify this by, everybody can verify this himself or herself. You observe yourself, because every day, every one of us, including me, we are sleeping every day. Even any time also you can sleep. So you observe yourself. I'll be ready to observe the moment when I am getting sleep. You keep observing. When really you are slipping into sleep, your observation is no more. After a few minutes you get up, just till now I was sleeping, but you wanted to observe yourself, but you can observe, if you can observe yourself, it is not sleep. How can it be possible? There are real yogis or saints who know the art of sleeping. What is that? Sleeping is an art? Yes. The real yogi, he doesn't need to sleep. Yogi doesn't sleep. So a person who is not able to sleep, who is suffering with insomnia, is he yogi? No, that is not the case. The real yogi, who is completely awakened in his soul consciousness, he doesn't sleep, but he makes his mind and senses to sleep when it is not required. What is the difference? In every one of us also, if we start observing and trying to know, actually, who is sleeping in us? If the real I am sleeps in us, then we do not exist. What we call I I say I am Ananta Krishna, but Ananta Krishna is only the name given. The I am in us, who is responsible for all our functions, inhalation, exhalation, all these things, if he really sleeps, then no more we will wake up. Our body should be taken away. Huh? So what we call sleep is only a closing down of our senses and mind. That is what we experience as sleep. But this is not voluntary for us. That is the difference between us and the yogi. For a yogi, it is quite voluntary. A person who is completely awakened in the soul consciousness, who is totally awakened in the state of yoga perfectly, for him it is voluntary. When he knows there is no work now for my mind and senses, then he shuts them, but he is not sleeping. He is awake. Because it is new for us, in the beginning it is difficult for us to accept or understand. But this is reality, this is the truth. We now accept that when every one of us, when we are sleeping, the one who is the real I am and his laboratory, this laboratory never sleeps and the I am never sleeps. Only the intermediary states, which is senses and mind, they sleep. The modern psychology can never explain this. There are thousands and thousands of books on psychology, modern psychology. There are books about sleep also. You can never find real explanation in any of them. Who is sleeping in us? It is only senses and mind. They require sleep because they are instruments. An instrument cannot go on working without a little break. If you do that, then it will be broken. Break down. That is why some people who are very greedy keep working for many hours, extra hours and all these without giving a pause. Then what happens? There will be a point of breakdown of their system. So therefore, an instrument needs a pause, a rest. Therefore, the mind and senses need an alternate, because this is about, according to the law of alternation, work and rest. In the nature, you have the operation of the law of alternation, without which there is no existence of all this life and all these things. You can observe. Sunrise, sunset, they alternate. Day and night, they alternate. Inhalation, exhalation, they alternate. So like this, there is a law of alternation which enables us to continue the work. If this is not there, it cannot continue. So therefore, regarding sleep, mind and senses are instruments, therefore they need alternation. So the yogi knows whenever there is any work for them, then he uses them. He uses his senses and mind and keeps them at work. When the work is completed, then when he sees that there is no need for some time, Then he shuts his senses and mind, and he is awake. This is new. It's not easy for us to accept because we are not still yet we have attained this state. And once we attain this state, we also experience the same. One fellow who was a disciple of Master E.K., he was very inquisitive and thinking himself of very high and all this. He wanted to test another saint who was connected with Master E.K. There was a great saint. So this fellow went to the ashram of that saint to test him when he will sleep. So this fellow made his bed just besides the bed of that saint. And this fellow, with great effort, he kept himself awake in the night to observe when the saint sleeps. He wants to prove that saint also sleeps. So, keenly observing the saint with open eyes, suddenly his eyes closed and he slipped into sleep. And after some half an hour, 1 hour, he suddenly woke up. I forgot, I got into sleep. And he looked, and the saint is smiling. My dear boy, are you not able to sleep? He was smiling like always. This chance is gone. So again, this fellow got up on his bed and sitting. Now I keep observing this saint when he is sleeping. Again the same thing happened. He slipped into sleep even while he was sitting. You don't know when you get into sleep. None of us, we don't know. Maybe I also, while giving this lesson also, I may slip into sleep. It may happen. Of course, so far it did not happen. Maybe listening to some other person who is speaking, we may slip into sleep, but not really when we are speaking. Of course, there are some very experts. While they are speaking also, they can sleep. That is different. So this fellow, he stayed 3 or 4 days, day and night with the saint, to see when he sleeps. But impossible for him. He was getting into sleep. When he is awake, his saint is smiling and said, "What boy, could not sleep?" Then he came back to verify this with Master E.K. When he came back, before he started explaining, Master E.K. smiled to him and said, "My dear boy, could you see when the saint is sleeping?" Because they are very connected. Master and the saint, they are connected. They know what is happening. They are very much connected. So this fellow, he is a disciple of Master E.K. He wanted to test the other saint. So Master said, "Don't do these foolish things, my dear boy." Then he asked how this saint keeps always awake. He doesn't need any sleep for his body. My dear boy, he is in a perfect yogic state. You are not. So you are identified with your senses and mind. Therefore, whenever your mind and senses are sleeping, you feel you are closer. But the I am in you is not sleeping, but you don't know this. But in him, he is stabilized in the I am. Therefore, he is a master of his mind and senses. So whenever necessary, he uses his senses and mind Otherwise, he closed them down and he is not sleeping. It is possible for a yogi, perfect yogi. So like this, Vairagya also, if somebody says, I got Vairagya, I am experiencing Vairagya, that means it is not. So it is his impression. If he uses any logic to prove that he got Vairagya, then also it is not. That is what is explained in this comparison. This is what is called Samprajnata. That means the Vairagya, which the person can know that he is having Vairagya, this is called Samprajnata. That such fellows always keep measuring how much advancement I got, how much Vairagya I got, how much Samadhi I got. So such persons feel that by a terrible practice we can get all these things, powers. These are not powers. So who is the person who has real Vairagya, Asamprajnata, is the one who does not think of Vairagya and keeps attending his duties, and naturally who is not attached to any of this, he is in real Vairagya. So non-attachment, very casually, very naturally, no need to think that I am not attached. If somebody says, I am not attached to my wife and children, that means he is very much attached. If he is not attached, why he should tell about this? If anybody says, I have been a great yogi since so many years, that means he is not. A real yogi will never have no occasion for him to tell the other person that he is a yogi. Because a person who wants to be recognized as a yogi by the other person cannot be a yogi. So therefore, so why then Patanjali, if this is not real Vairagya, a Samprajnata is not real Vairagya, why she should mention this then in his aphorism? Unless you know what is darkness, you cannot know what is light. You see? There are some people who think that why can't there be light always? Why there should be darkness? You know this in Russia and especially in St. Petersburg and more in the north, you know this. What does it mean? You know, in the summer solstice days, there is no dark, there is no night. Only maybe hardly for half an hour, like that. If you go more to near the North Pole or somewhere, then you have no darkness. There are some places 6 months, no dark, no night, always day. Other 6 months, only night, no day. So, when you are in the period where there is no sunlight, always it is dark, it is always night, then how do you feel? You feel very sick. So therefore, there is an alternation of light and darkness. So therefore, we have to remember why Patanjali is mentioning this samprajnata type of vairagya, when it is not real vairagya, it is because we, every one of us, we are trying to practice. We are trying to practice these steps to attain, to reach that state. So while practicing, you must know what is real vairagya or asamprajnata and what is false vairagya or samprajnata vairagya. You must know all these things. Unless you know this, you cannot know what is real or what is true experience. So, when a person remembers that he has been practicing for vairagya for the last so many years, then still it is, he himself is telling that he is practicing for vairagya. So this is comparable to just the example which just now I mentioned. The whole night, if somebody remembers that he is sleeping, that means he is not sleeping at all. If you ask anybody, have you slept the whole night? Then if he answers you, yes, the whole night I have been sleeping, because I am observing whether I am sleeping or not. For every half an hour I am looking the time, I am observing that I am sleeping or not. So the whole night I have observed myself that I am sleeping. That means he is not sleeping at all. That itself is a proof. So the real sleep is not a conscious process. So in the same manner, vairagya is not a real vairagya is not a conscious process. Then is it unconscious process? No. It is not unconscious also. Sleep is, when you speak about sleep, for normal person, when he is sleeping, he doesn't know anything. Is the sleep unconscious state or conscious state? It is not conscious state, because if it is conscious state, it is not sleep. Is it unconscious state? Yes, for your mind and senses only, but for real self it is not unconscious. You see, if anybody went into coma, is it sleep? That is totally unconscious. That person who is in coma, he is completely disconnected. But sleep is not coma. You can differentiate between sleep and coma state. Similarly, there is another real state of sleep or real state of vairagya is, it is neither conscious, it is not a conscious process, it is not an unconscious process, but it is a supra-conscious process, supra-conscious, which is not known to the modern psychology. Modern psychology always explains about conscious levels and unconscious, subconscious levels, conscious and subconscious. But they have no idea of supra-conscious. Can you see this in modern psychology? Any one of you, if you are a psychologist, you can search for this. If there is something explained as supra-conscious, what is supra-conscious is explained in spiritual psychology, not in normal psychology. So supra-conscious, it is not unconscious. So this is called, so this so this Vairagya is not Prajnata, that means conscious. It is not Aprajnata, not unconscious, but Asamprajnata, supraconscious. The real consciousness is, the real Vairagya is in supra-conscious state. So, we have entered into the 17th aphorism. So, we will have to, because this is connected with some psychology, some study of psychology also, the real psychology. So this we will take up in our next class. I hope it is clear and enjoyable. Thank you all very much. Vasudeva.